Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something pretty important, actually. The U.S. Army is trying to improve their soldier housing.
Interesting.
We've got this article straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, the official U.S. Army website.
Oh, wow. Right from the source.
It is, yeah. And it makes you think, right? You've got these soldiers, they're coming back from deployment, or they're just finishing some crazy intense training.
Right.
Coming home should be like a huge relief, but if the housing is a mess,
Oh, yeah, that's not good.
it kind of defeats the purpose, right?
For sure.
That's what makes this deep dive so interesting to me, at least.
Yeah, I mean, the Army's really tackling this head on with what they're calling the 2025 Tenant Satisfaction Survey.
Okay.
And this isn't just, like a quick check the box kind of thing.
Right.
It seems like they're really signaling a potential shift in how they think about their soldiers' well-being.
You're hitting on something important there. In the past, there have been a lot of concerns about how responsive the Army was to housing issues.
Yeah.
But this new approach, with all this data and transparency, it feels like they're finally actually listening to soldiers and their families.
Absolutely. And the scale of this survey is massive.
Okay.
They're looking at over 200,000 tenants, which is a huge number.
Wow.
Think about that. Families, single soldiers, living in all sorts of housing situations, you name it.
Right.
Privatized, government-owned, government-leased.
Yeah, they've got it all.
So they're aiming to really get a handle on the full range of experiences, which is important.
Yeah, that's super important. And for anyone listening who might not be familiar with military housing, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
No, not at all.
So the fact that they're including all these different types in the survey really shows they're committed to getting the full picture.
And to make sure they're getting honest feedback.
Yeah.
No one holding back.
Right.
They brought in a third-party, CEL and Associates, Inc.
Okay.
They're going to be running this whole thing online, which is convenient.
Makes sense.
It'll run for 60 days, starting March 3rd, 2025.
Okay, so a decent amount of time.
Yeah, enough to get a good amount of responses, I think.
Yeah, so 60 days online, that seems pretty accessible.
Right.
But I am curious, though, how do they make sure that soldiers and families feel comfortable being totally honest?
That's a good question.
Especially if they've had bad experiences,
Yeah, well, they've made it super clear that this whole thing is voluntary and everything is confidential,
Okay.
which is really important to build trust.
Right, because if you're worried about, repercussions,
Yeah, exactly.
you're probably not going to be as honest.
Exactly. It's all about creating a safe space for people to share their real opinions.
Makes sense. So, they're gathering all this data.
Right.
But that's only step one. What's the Army actually going to do with this information?
Yeah, that's the key, right?
Yeah.
They've said this isn't just about collecting data, it's about using it to make actual improvements.
That's fair. I like that.
We're talking everything from the quality of the housing itself to how quickly maintenance requests get handled to even improving those community amenities.
That's a wide range.
It is.
So, for example, let's say the survey reveals that maintenance response times are super slow across the board.
Right.
Then the Army can actually take that data and, put resources toward fixing that specific problem.
Exactly. It's about closing the loop between feedback and action.
I like it.
And this focus on action, that's a promising sign, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
It shows they're serious about making things better for their soldiers and family.
It really does. Yeah, it seems like they're finally trying to walk the walk, so to speak.
Yeah, and this commitment really comes straight from the top.
Right. In the article, they actually quote Lieutenant General David Wilson. He's the Deputy Chief of Staff for G9.
Oh.
And he says that investing in housing improvements that provide safe, secure, quality housing is important for our soldiers and their families.
I mean, that's a powerful statement, right?
It is, yeah.
It's like they're acknowledging that a soldier's well-being isn't just about, how they perform on the battlefield.
It's about their whole life, their families too.
Exactly. It's the whole picture. Like if a soldier's constantly worried about, a leaky roof, or if their family doesn't have enough space,
right,
that's going to be a distraction.
It's going to weigh on them for sure.
Absolutely. And General Wilson, he goes on to say, this survey and our continued housing improvement efforts highlight our continued commitment to the health and welfare of our soldiers and their families, which we know directly impacts Army readiness.
That's huge, connecting housing to readiness.
It's a strategic issue, not just about comfort.
Right, because if your soldiers are stressed about their living situation,
Yeah.
they're not going to be as focused on the mission.
Exactly. They're saying that taking care of families is part of having a strong fighting force.
And it's not just empty words. They're backing it up with transparency, which is pretty remarkable.
You mean like their decision to make the survey results public?
Yeah, exactly. You don't see that every day, especially from big institutions.
It shows they're serious about being accountable.
It really does.
Yeah.
You know, they're saying we're willing to be held accountable for the outcomes.
And that kind of transparency builds trust.
For sure, trust with the soldiers and their families, but also with the public.
Exactly. It shows they're willing to admit maybe they haven't always gotten it right.
Right, and that they're dedicated to actually making things better.
Which is the big deal.
It is. This whole deep dive is making you think about how complex military life really is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's not just about, combat and deployments. It's about creating a supportive environment for soldiers and their families.
I think that's a really important takeaway here.
It is, yeah. And the Army's starting to realize that,
They're understanding that happy families mean a more effective army.
it makes me wonder what other aspects of military life could benefit from this kind of approach.
That's a good question.
We see how focusing on housing can affect morale and readiness. But what about other things like access to childcare or healthcare?
Or even supporting spouses who are trying to find jobs.
Yeah, exactly. These are all things that affect military families.
Absolutely. And those families affect the Army as a whole.
So imagine if they took this same approach with those issues.
That would be pretty amazing.
It's about going beyond just acknowledging the problems and actually finding solutions based on data and, what the people actually need.
And that shift in thinking could be a game changer.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, hey, we actually care about quality of life,
Right. And it's not just talk either. I mean, the article actually links to a bunch of other initiatives that the Army's working on.
Oh, really? So it's not just housing. They're looking at the bigger picture.
Exactly. They're trying to address like childcare access, mental health services, even support for spouses trying to find jobs.
That's great. It's like they're building this whole support system.
Yeah, a more holistic approach for sure.
Makes you wonder, though, what's the long game here? If the Army actually fixes these quality of life issues, could that lead to better recruitment and retention?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I mean, it makes sense, right? If soldiers and families feel supported and valued.
They'll want to.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it can make it way easier to attract new recruits, too.
Right, because who wouldn't want to join an organization that's actually taking care of its people?
It's a strong selling point for sure.
Well, I'm hopeful that all these efforts really do make a difference for the people who, dedicate their lives to serving our country.
Absolutely. They deserve the best.
They do. This has been a really insightful deep dive.
It has been.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And for everyone listening out there, definitely check out the article for yourselves.
Yeah, there's a lot more detail in there.
We've just scratched the surface, but one thing's clear. The Army's making moves not just in, military operations, but in how they take care of their own.
It's a really positive shift.
We'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and as always, keep asking those tough questions.